Let me start off by saying happy Valentine's to all. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents that's held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of our process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to all the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or any other organization. If a request for a deferral is received this evening, the committee grants such a request. The committee, after we consult with their secretary-treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application, at which point then there'll be new notice posted on the property and circulated. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for your presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record, and any material that is submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at discretion of this committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose an application must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for your presentation, and all remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair of the committee, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be the discretion of this committee. If there are several speakers that share the same view, we ask that you elect a spokesperson to portray those group opinion to us. We want to hear all the views. However, covering the same points or indicating the same concern doesn't help us arrive at a decision quicker. The owner or agent will then be provided a further 5 minutes to respond to any comments made by any of the interested parties and answer any questions from the committee. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, and particularly where there are any proposed conditions, this will be your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken to a committee for decision, and that will mark the end of all discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of decision. We provided a green sheet in the back for this purpose. We ask that you please fill this out and leave it with us before the hearing is over tonight. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of our decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent to the applicant, the owner, and/or agent, and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with our decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last date to file an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board will be noted on the decision itself. If no appeal is received within a prescribed time frame, the decision of our committee becomes final and binding, and our Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the agent or applicant through written correspondence. People attending this committee meeting tonight are to be courteous to and respectful to the members of the committee, town staff, and other people in attendance tonight. And for everyone's information, tonight's viewing will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream webpage. And that can be found at www.oakville.ca/live. We ask that cellular phones and pagers be put in the silent position during the meeting tonight. So that's our preamble, what I call rules of engagement. Tonight we have one regret. Mr. Talowski cannot be here, and Ms. Sherry McHale is running slightly late. She'll be entering soon. Is there any members tonight that have any declaration of any pecuniary interest? See none. Remind me to ask Ms. McHale when she arrives as well. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to either defer or withdraw an application? Anyone wishing to defer or withdraw an application? Okay, seeing none. Okay, we don't have any consent applications, and we'll allow Ms. McHale a minute to settle in. I just asked a question, Ms. McHale, while you're proceeding to your seat, if there's any items this evening that you wish to declare pecuniary interest in. No. Okay, seeing none. Well, then we'll proceed with the first application, CAVA 11-2017. This is an item that was deferred from our January 31st, 2017 meeting. The owner agent come forward, please. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Good evening. Darren Smith, 453 Brant Street, Burlington. I'm the agent. Hi, I'm Gary McDonald. We're the owner of 64 Forsyth.
Okay, I'm just trying to remember the reason for deferral. Was this the notice issue?
Correct.
Yes, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, just before you proceed, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 11-2017? This is for 64 Forsyth Street. See none. Okay, members, you've read the staff report, you done your site visit, you understand the application. Is there any items, clarification that you require? Any questions? Sir, go ahead.
I wasn't at the last meeting. Did you get a chance to present anything at all?
No.
No.
No, okay. I just want to follow this thing here. In 1994, you were given an application to increase, not you yourself, sir, but the previous owner of the house was given an application to increase the lot coverage from 35 to 41%, and the residential floor area from 40 to 50. Roughly 50.23. And at that time, it was based on the design of the house and the design of the, well, and this is where I was unclear. This pergola that already exists, or this structure, this open structure that exists, was that part of the original application? Did that come afterwards?
We're not sure. My client has only moved in here in the last few months.
Oh, okay.
So the application that's prior to us was existing conditions that we sort of inherited.
All right. So I wasn't sure either. Pulling back then, I'm sure you read the objections of your neighbors with respect to the structure, and I saw your response. Is there anything else you want to add to that in terms of I mean, are you?
Well, I did have a conversation with Ms. Croucher this afternoon. She called
Yeah.
from Texas. Her main concern was the fence. We talked with her about the aesthetics of the fence after the fact, understanding that the committee or the planning department has supported our application. She was reserved to be satisfied with that, but her more concerns were with the aesthetics of the fence itself on her side, and I assured her that we would meet with her at the time.
And just bear with me, this, because, so the lady, I've got two, well, actually I have three, but there's one from a Donald Croucher and another from a Darren Sanger-Smith is,
That's myself.
oh, that's.
I'm
Oh,
responding.
that's your Darren Sanger-Smith. And who's Gary McDonald then? That's you. So it's just Donald Croucher. Okay. And Amy Shore?
As the contractor.
That's the contractor, okay. So we only have one gentleman objecting then, which is this Donald Croucher.
Correct.
And is that what you're referring to? And you
Correct.
spoke with
His wife.
his wife?
Yeah.
And they seem to be okay with it now?
Well, they've come to terms with it.
Come to terms
The
with it.
bigger concern afterwards became the aesthetics afterwards.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Are there questions? Is there anything you wish to add to the application?
No.
Okay, thank you. We'll take this matter to committee and we'll issue a decision. Who would like to move a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Arcastle. Go ahead.
having reviewed the materials, heard the submissions, and reviewed the written submissions, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed front eaves of the existing dwelling and new accessory structure be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted, and the second being that the approval will expire within 2 years if a permit's not been issued. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there a discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support, subject to those two conditions? No one opposed, your application is being approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll proceed with application CAV 20 of 2017 for the property at 606 Lakeshore Road West.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Franco Romano here on behalf of the owner.
Thank you, sir. I think we need some of your planning evidence on, well, we have here staff are supporting 2 out of the 4 variances. They support variance 1 and 2.
1, 2, and 4. Sorry, 1, 3, and 4.
Well, this is what you say here, 1 and 3. I'm just trying to see what happened to variance 4 because it seems to be silent in the report unless I missed it.
It's the same as 3, sir. It's just
Oh,
an
it's
overall
because
building
the
height.
other,
Yeah, it's an overall building
the
height.
old bylaw, they should have put /4,
Yeah, right.
just so it doesn't throw us off. So they support 1, 3, and 4 and not 2.
Right.
So perhaps, I'll leave it up to you, but, we should probably hear more of your evidence on 2 than 1, 3, and 4. But we'll need a presentation.
Fair enough, sir. So the subject property is located on the east side of Lakeshore, and you'll see this is the existing footprint. Number 600 Lakeshore is immediately to the north, and that is a building footprint that you'll see. On the air photo, 271 West Dale is the rear yard. So West Dale is over here. Lakeshore, it's a corner lot. So we have a rear yard to side yard condition and a side yard to side yard condition. What you'll see is the subject property is irregular shaped. It's got a frontage of over 30 meters, 31.9 meters, and it goes down to 12.2 meters. So there's a 20-meter difference from front to back. So care is being given in the design. What we'll see on the site plan in yellow is the existing dwelling. Outlined in blue is the proposed dwelling. So the care is being given in the design to align with number 600 Lakeshore. There's no front yard setback variance. Now this isn't a straight line, so there's some angular conditions. What you'll see here is in blue is the outline of the footprint, and this is a canopy in the back. So what we'll see in the footprint is that we've got a length and a building envelope that does undulate. It is a building that consists of a number of composition elements of building. It's not a box, and it is certainly not monolithic as described in the staff report. We have building lengths that have taken care to not extend too deep into the rear yard because the rear does taper down, so it gets smaller as we go to the back. 13.56 meter length, 11.48 meter length in the middle, 13.56, 14.32. Not large by any extent. If we look at number 600, we'll see that that has a length of 17.1 meters. What that building then does in terms of footprint, well, we'll just look at a cross section first. So in this cross section, hopefully the colors show up better on your screen than it does on the overhead. This is grade. And each color on this elevation, pink, blue, green, purple, yellow, red, orange, describes on the cross section the various composition elements in the building design. If we look at the footprint, you'll see again the undulation. 13.56 meter length, 14.3 meters. This is the main floor. Second floor is different. Second floor does have setbacks with this canopy at the back. If we look at a side elevation, we'll see that there's undulating elements in the design on both sides. So what we have really is a building, when we look again at the footprint, it is 19.6 meters lot coverage, whereas 30% lot coverage is permitted. This cannot, in any stretch of the imagination, be an overdevelopment of the site. When we look at gross floor area, the request represents a difference of 37.77 square meters. What does that amount to in terms of building? If we looked at this building and tried to bring it into compliance with just the floor area variance, we're looking at taking off 0.97 meters in length. So I would submit that the request to seek a 0.97 meters in length, given that we have lengths of 13.56, an undulating length as we go from front to back, is minor in nature. And the footprint, this is the 1.47 meter side yard setback at the north. It's at a pinch point, widens out to 5.42 at the front. And that's given the angular nature of that north lot line. The south lot line is more straight. It's almost a right angle, not quite, but this is where the 2.44 meters is. There's one tree here, one tree here. There's not a lot of trees that are being affected, so we're happy with the conditions that staff have requested. In terms of height, this is the height request. And that is lower than the 10.24 meter height that the neighboring building is at 606. There's 606. So I would submit that the variances are minor in nature, have no unacceptable adverse impact, and satisfy all four tests for a minor variance.
Thank you, sir. Any questions at the moment? Yes. Mr. Mark Charlevoix.
Can you, do you mind putting back up that site plan which showed the side yard setbacks and that you're dealing with? So let me start off by first saying it's a weird lot. I got you, and you're right. Your coverage is fantastic. I guess the questions I need to ask is, what did you guys do in terms of you know, you've increased the building size, and I know you made reference to the fact about carving it off the back, but the truth of the matter is you expanded the building left and right, and now you're looking for reductions on both side yard setbacks, where normally it would be 4 meters on either side. The 2.44 you mentioned is straight, so that's quite a bit of meters there. I get the 1.47 pinch, not really sure where it starts to become 4. But I guess the question I need to ask is, you don't have to take off the back of this building. You can take off some of the side of this building, reduce the setbacks on either side, and conform. So
You mean increase the setback?
Yeah.
increase the setbacks. What did I say?
Reduce,
Take
but
off.
that's,
Reduce,
okay.
yeah,
We
okay.
understand what you're saying.
So did you guys look at that? I mean, what's the difficulty with doing it in that fashion?
Well, certainly any property in Oakville coming for redevelopment, brand new, can comply with the bylaw. The question is, how is the neighborhood developed? And the neighborhood is developed in a fashion where side yard setbacks are not 100% compliant with the zoning bylaw. So we have conditions where there have been variations, and we see that at number 600. Number 600 had both side yards at 2.44 meters. If we look at the number 27 Westdale Road, this side yard is not 4.27 meters. The side yard is closer to 1.8 meters. So this is an older building. This is the bungalow, and that is virtually on the lot line. Again, it's an air photo, so it's not a perfect. So it's tighter on one side and wider on the other side. But what we have is a condition, and we'll see number 600 again on the air photo, 2.4 and 2.4, and the 2.4 is at all of these pinch points. They're not four and change, and it is also a 31 meter lot frontage. So when we're looking at how the neighborhood is redeveloping in terms of character, the new dwellings do not comply with the bylaw. There is some variation in the width of the side yards. So care is being given again. This is just a pinch point, 1.47 to 5.42, and it's 4 somewhere in here.
Mr. Romano, you have to speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry.
You can hear,
I
or
can
just pull it towards you.
Flick
Yeah,
it
there you go.
over, yeah. Over here, we have a side yard to a rear yard condition. So that's different than a side to side, and I believe that from a planning perspective, more latitude can be given to that condition, because we're dealing with a position where this spatial separation, even at 2.44 meters, is going to be in excess of 12 meters. So that is it. That's why we have to look at each variance on a site-by-site basis to see if one makes sense on a property as compared to another. So we thought that that was a reasonable site design. There were earlier iterations that did things that were different, and we had talked to planning before actually making the committee decision, submission rather. So hopefully that answers your question, sir.
It does. You wouldn't happen to know when that building, that large building was built, do you?
600?
Yeah. Is that a fairly recent one?
It was in the last, 2.5 to 3 years.
Okay.
This is a Google shot of 2011,
And you can see this, yeah.
and it was the old bungalow.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have the drawings. There is no date on it though. Mr.
That's all right.
Shakiri doesn't have the drawing dates.
And you know what, I'm willing to accept the argument about the neighborhood and the setbacks in there, because certainly it's not the case. My first reaction is, you're asking for an extension of the envelope, and you're also got greater square footage. Talk to me again about the height. That was the other thing. I kind of got glossed over in here, but it's a fairly large increase, and yet your floors seem to be fairly standard, 10 feet and 8 feet, nothing crazy.
Correct. They aren't
but
anything
so
crazy. It's just the.
It's just the design of it.
What's trying to be achieved is that symmetry in terms of the composition of the building elements, not making it a squat roof. And it's really it's central to the footprint. So here is,
Just in that area there.
this is 9. This is 9.69. And again, that's actually going to be shorter than the 10 1/4.
Yeah,
That number 600 is.
I know, that's a pretty big house.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, it's okay. Okay, any further questions, Mr. Romano? See none. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 20 of 2017 at 606 Lakeshore Road West? Oh, come on
The
down.
gentleman put his hand up.
I couldn't see behind you, Mr. Romano.
We are the owner of, he's the owner of Unit 600 beside the 606.
The one we were just talking about, 606
Yeah.
Lakeshore Boulevard West, yes, okay.
The only concern we're speaking about is number
Yeah,
one.
we need your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Yasser Youssef. I'm the owner of 600 Lakeshore Road West.
606.
600.
Oh, yeah, 600, sorry, 600, yes, yes. The abutting property.
Yeah.
Okay, sir, you're here as his agent, go ahead.
Yeah.
And your name?
My name is Hani El Sombati. I'm his brother-in-law.
Okay. Okay, so can you speak in the microphone so we can hear
Yeah,
you?
sure. We're speaking about only number one. We see that the setback of the 1.47 is too close, and it's against the bylaw. This is our concern. We don't have any concern about the other point of the height and stuff like this and the area, square footage. Only our concern is the 1.47 meter.
You must have recently bought the property?
Yeah.
Okay. You know that your property that you recently bought was subject to a committee of adjustment decision itself?
I wasn't the builder. I just bought it from a builder, so
Right.
I didn't go through this issues.
Yeah, I believe we'll just have we'll pull it up here, but it seems like you may have received a side yard variance to 2.46 meters on the north and south side. So the bylaw
Yeah.
required 4.2, and this committee granted variances down to 2.46 for both side yards.
2.46 would be okay for me if We, if the 606 would go to 2.6, that would be fine. But 1.47 is too close.
Okay, but you heard that it's closer to the pinch point, which is furthest away from you. So you
Yeah.
see how it,
I believe it can be designed. I'm already an engineer, and I know that it can be designed and have a corner or something which avoid
Yeah.
to have the setback to 1.47.
okay, so you're recommending that it should be at least a minimum of 2.46, like what was granted on yours?
Yeah.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Charlevoix?
Just to clarify, can I ask you, what is it about? I understand it's close, because that's why he's applying, because it is
Just
too close.
privacy.
But what is it your concern? Because
Just privacy.
just privacy? And this particular point here overlooks your backyard, I guess?
Yeah.
And, okay.
But is there any windows there?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Are they right at?
The main bedroom even to the front, this one.
So you believe that an extra meter will give you more privacy?
For sure.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Romano to put up the elevation on that side, sir. I'd just like to see what's at that pinch point. How far is that window away on the second floor? How far are those windows away from that pinch point?
That view?
It's about
A third of the house?
5 to 6 meters
So
away.
can you go back to the other site plan? Can you approximate where the windows are?
Windows are over here.
And what's the approximate distance from the window to the property line?
3.5 meters.
3.5? Okay, thank you. Any questions?
This is the shape?
No,
On the
that's
south
That's
side?
a canopy over rear. This is this. It's a rear porch.
So, okay.
Okay, so those windows are approximately 3 meters away from the property line. Any questions? Anything else you wish to add, sir?
No,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee on application CAV 2017 at 606 Lakeshore Boulevard, Lakeshore Road West, sorry. Okay, Mr. Romano?
So you took the thunder out of my response.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
unless there are any questions?
I apologize. It's
That's
just a
okay.
natural question to ask based on the submissions we heard. Any questions of Mr. Romano? Okay, thank you. We'll take this matter to committee if you have no further submissions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who would like to move a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I'll put forward a recommendation. Having read the staff report, and I note in here that staff is not supportive of variance 2, but is supportive of variance 1, 3, and 4. And having listened to the application today, as well as the comments from the public, as I look at this site and the design of it, it's a difficult site to work with, and I can see that at some point they had to make a decision on which side yard they were going to kind of follow to keep symmetry. And I think that orienting sort of the more squared off side yard where it's 2.44 lines the house up better with the street. I'm not really sure if it'd be as good the other way. And although I appreciate the concern of the neighbor with respect to this site, I think this is one of those peculiar sites where we have to make some concessions. I do note that the windows, as was mentioned in part of the brief, the actual windows start at around, let's call it the 3-meter mark. I'm not sure if that's true. The one area that I was concerned about to some extent was the fact that even though we're creating these side yard setbacks, we're also dealing with an application to increase the size of the house. However, after looking at the thing and taking into account the coverage of this thing, and particularly the neighborhood and the size of the houses that are in there, where this is on Lakeshore, I actually don't find that the size of this house is incompatible with everything around here. So I'm going to put forward a motion that, that this be accepted, that it meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and make it subject to, and just bear with me, there's 2 conditions here, and a third, that an arborist report be submitted which demonstrates preservation of trees within the southern side yard to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Engineering. And the second condition, that the northerly side yard setback of 1.47 only apply to that portion of the foundation shown on the plans as submitted. And further, that this application will expire within 2 years should construction not start or a building permit not be issued.
Are you also doing the one in general accordance with the plan submitted?
Thank you for catching that one. Normally it's written here, and I would have just read it. And subject further to the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the drawings as submitted.
Yeah, as far as conditions. Mr. Hecht, I have a question for you quickly. And it deals with the first condition that there be an arborist report submitted that demonstrates preservation of trees within the southern side yard to the satisfaction of Director of Development Engineering. I was recently reminded that sometimes those conditions are hard to enforce, you know, to preserve certain trees or to ask for certain matters to be preserved vegetation. And how could we, is there been an evolution of thought on those type of conditions, or are they still deemed to be appropriate for the purposes of the identified interest in this application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the intent of that condition is to examine the feasibility of tree preservation within that side yard setback. Often through the site alteration permit process, an arborist report and tree preservation plan is typically required. The planning staff review of this have identified the trees as a component to the neighborhood character, and the intent of that condition is just to do best efforts to try to preserve the trees.
Okay, so on that basis, there'll be a tree preservation report required as part of the permitting process, the site alt permit?
That's correct.
Okay, so which demonstrates what you mean, the intent of the word demonstrate means to examine the feasibility. And it would be the Director of Development Engineering's sign off whether or not he feels the arborist report did that, or if it doesn't do that, there'll be something else that will be done to satisfy that condition. I just want to make sure it's cleared and someone is not out of compliance with zoning in the future. Let's say as a result of the construction root trees, or the roots are impacted. We have the situation where there's an arborist report submitted, the Director of Engineering signs off. We all expect the tree to survive. It gets impacted because of soil compaction and the tree dies. What does that do to the variance? That's sort of what I was reminded not too long ago about conditions like that, and I'm wondering whether they're better left at the site alt permit. But if you're saying it goes to the character of the neighborhood and that's an important condition, I'll accept that. But I just...
That was the intent, again, to examine the feasibility. Not all the trees may be preserved, but the arborist report would do best efforts to try to promote the preservation to the extent possible.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted some clarity on that condition. All right, so the condition is, the 4 conditions are as stated. The arborist report, the side yard applies to the portion of the foundation shown in the plans, the 2 years, and the general accordance with the plans. Any discussion or recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that application has been approved.
Thank you kindly.
Yes. As applied for, yes.
Sorry.
Mr. Romano, I think you took our exhibits.
Yes.
You took our property. Okay, so application CAV 21 of 2017, this is at 448 Maple Avenue.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Bill Outred. My address is RR2, Hillsburg, Ontario.
Welcome, Mr. Outridge. Just before we proceed on the presentation, see if one's required, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 21-2017 at 448 Maple Avenue? Okay.
I think Mr. Outridge meant to give his business address.
Oh, yes. I think he did. Maybe I misheard.
Sorry, should I give I'll give my business address, 2140 Winston. 2140 Winston Park Drive in Oakville.
All right, there you go. Just, okay. Members, I'm in your hands. Do you have any items of clarification? Do you wish to ask any questions? You wish a presentation? Yes, Mr. Picard? All right, sir, anything you wish to add to the application?
No, Mr. Chair, unless the committee has any specific questions.
All right, we'll take this matter into committee and issue a decision. Ms. Picard?
Happy to give you a recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you.
I'll move a recommendation to approve the application as submitted before us. I'll note that there are no objections from the public and that staff is supporting this application. The additional garage floor areas is within the internal envelope of the house as designed, so it'll still look like a standard double garage from the streetscape. And the height that's requested before us as a variance has been mitigated by several elements in the roof line so that it will not appear as such from the streetscape. Having said that, I'll move a motion to approve the application subject to a standard condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans. For this application, the plans are dated August 12th of 2016. And the condition that the approval will expire within 2 years from the date of the decision if the proposed development has not proceeded and/or building permit not issued.
Thank you for that recommendation. Is there discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, your application has been approved, sir.
Thank you.
Application CAV 22-2017 at 273 Elton Park Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. It's John Wilmot, the agent,
Good evening, sir.
594 Chartwell, Suite 3, Oakville.
Okay, so we'll probably need a presentation, but you can more or less take some guidance from the staff recommendations in terms of which variance is not supported and be guided by that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So it seems to me the only major issue that staff had was with the balcony. This is an image here on the screen of the rear of the property. The balcony is here off the proposed off the master bedroom. It's a small private balcony, simply for the use of the owners. It's not large, and the overlook is actually quite insignificant. Really, that's usually a concern. It is set back significantly. I'll throw up a site plan. And forgot my pen, but here's the covered porch here. Is on the main level, and this small section here is the balcony. So it's quite a distance, 12 meters back from the southerly property. It's well over the 4.2 meters setback to the property to the east. So I don't think that is terribly significant. I know in the past that this committee has supported smaller private balconies. That was consistent with some other development in this neighborhood, and therefore I'd submit that it is a minor variance and meets the floor test. I think that was pretty much the only concern staff had.
So has there been any interest by any of the abutting neighbors on the balcony or the porch? So can I just ask you, you call it a porch?
Sorry, there is a main floor covered porch that the master bedroom sits above, and only a small portion it's about 8 feet deep that sits
Second
above
level.
as an uncovered porch.
So the second level.
Sorry, an uncovered balcony.
Right. It's a balcony on the second level, but it's a porch on the main.
Yes, you might see it better here.
Yes.
So,
Yes, okay. So has there been any, have you talked to any of the neighbors? Have they shown
unfortunately,
any-
our clients were overseas. They just got back Saturday. They did not get a chance to talk to anybody. I know that's common. I wish they did, but they didn't. But we're not aware of any objection to it.
Okay, let's see if there's any questions of Mr. Charlebois.
Just because it's Valentine's Day, I guess, I don't know. This is the first time that I think, and it's not meant to be critical, but it's the first time I think I've dealt with a three-car garage where the town has basically didn't comment on the fact that the reason for the garage is, or the reason for the bylaw with respect to the garage is to make it ideally look like a two-car garage. We do deal with bigger garages, but most of the time the square footage is internal, whereas this one is external with 3 doors. And not only that, we have the garage projecting 4.2 meters in front of the house, which again seems to violate some of the design guidelines. I guess I don't have much to state. And then from there, the reason the driveway width has to be so wide is because we have 3-car garages. So maybe I'm just talking to myself on that particular one, and I'm supposed to ask a question, so let me move on.
Well, no, in fairness, because I did direct Mr. Wilmot to focus on areas of difference with the staff report, but you raised another element that you're concerned about, and I'd like to give Mr. Wilmot a fair chance to respond to it, so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I forgot, quite frankly, to raise this issue. I'll bring up the site plan again. We would be prepared, if you see the red line, in terms of the driveway, they did comment, but not necessarily object on the driveway width. And we'd be prepared to reduce the driveway to 7.5 meters instead of it was originally drawn at 10.15, which is the entire width of the garage. So we'd be prepared to do that. I'd like to point out here that this is the 2-car section right here, and it is right at the setback line. The reason that it's a bit of a technicality. It says it projects 4.2 meters in front of the front wall of the house. Well, the reality is this is the front wall of the house, but technically the bylaw says this piece here is the front wall because it's the longest side. And I'm going to show you an elevation, and I think you'd agree that the main feature is this wall here, and that projection is significantly less than what's permitted. So I'll just show that perspective of that side of the house. And so as you can see here, that this really appears like the main wall of the house, and because it's a corner lot, we've sort of stepped the corner around as it turns the corner, and I think this really feels like the dominant the wall. I'll just go back to my site plan again. That section on the main floor, because it's considered on the main floor, is actually 15 foot 11 and a half apparently, and the columns are another almost 6 feet out, making that, over 20 feet, close to 22 feet long. But the town in the bylaw suggests that the dominant wall is here, and that's 18'3". So I find that more of a technicality than a major deviation from the bylaw. Furthermore, the third car garage is set back in line with this piece here, and that elevation is significantly broken down into what I think is a good composition. So it's not as dominating at all. So I hope that responds.
Yeah, I'm glad I rambled for a bit because, to be honest with you, when I look at these drawings here, your elevation shows the fact that the garage isn't projecting out. It's hard to tell on the ones that I had submitted here.
Yes.
That it was doing that.
So it just comes down to who gets the benefit of the porch, in terms of which side of the wall gets counted. Like you showed on your site plan, if it's counted on one side, it's greater than the length of that wall, and if the other side takes it, it's greater. It's like a competition for
Right.
who gets the porch
Exactly.
for a zone.
So the next one then, if I can deal with, is the height, which kind of got skipped over. As I read this, and perhaps I'm wrong, but the reason you're looking for a roof height is because you're looking for essentially 11 feet of living space on the ground floor, and then a further 9 feet on the second floor, as I'm reading this. And quite frankly, you just can't do that and meet the bylaw. So I'm
So 11 feet?
Well, as I read the elevation in here, I read it as 11 feet, 1 inch for the ground floor, and 9 feet for the second floor. And I'm assuming, and that's why I was going to ask you that question, is this the sort of clear height at the first and second floor? Because I can't figure out why
The
your
11
building
feet.
should be so tall.
Well, the 11 feet is floor to floor, so it's a 10-foot ceiling plus 12 inches.
Okay, that's a floor-to-floor measurement?
Yes, which is not terribly uncommon. The other reason is after we got through the grading, it's a relatively flat site, and our grading engineers or surveyor has suggested the house be pulled up a little bit to accommodate the fall of and grading. The request is only for
Yes, for 9.3 meters. Or
correct,
0.3
and
meters more.
so that essentially is a 0.3 meter difference. Most of that is towards the front. It's not into the side yard on this side where the house is set back significantly, because that's another corner lot. So I would, concur with planning staff that it is set in such a way that there's little or no impact to neighbors, because it's got significant setbacks on all sides and on a corner.
Yeah, it's just, in the future, they're just to help, because, for example, your explanation on the front face of the building just helped tremendously. The comments from staff was simply that the height worked, and I couldn't figure out why the height worked and why it was there and why they were approving it, and why you needed it, and that's why I'm forced to try and go and figure it out from these drawings, and you don't always have the material. So you're telling me that the 0.3 meters is as a result of a grade change?
Well, partly, it's not so much a grade change, but a grading design, so that we can get proper drainage away from the house. The floor-to-floor heights are consistent with many of the properties around the neighborhood. There's slope ceilings in the design. For example, here, we don't have a big mass of house. We have a nice gable that's broken down. There's slope ceiling. This happens to be a bedroom. It's not dominating. It's just a function of the roof slopes, which are an attractive element.
You know what, I'm going to stop you there, because I agree with you. It's, as I said, I think the biggest problem here is just sort of not having all this info while you're out there trying to figure it out.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, okay. Is anyone here again has an interest in application CAVA 23-2017? Oh, no, CAVA 22-2017 at 273 Alton Park Road. Okay, we'll take this back into committee. Who would like to move a recommendation on this application?
Mr. Chairman, since I spoke the most, I'll go forward with this.
Okay, that's fair.
Having conducted my site visit, read the report from staff, and listened to the presentation, and looking at the variances, and I know I didn't speak to balcony, so I'll get that. I'm actually in agreement with staff on, although I'm going to deal with one thing on your driveway. So as we get into it, are you committing here that with respect to your driveway that you will reduce it as you showed?
We'd be prepared to commit to that, yes.
So what was that?
But hang on the driveway, you're reducing it in the front to 9.5. Did you, is that what
Yeah,
you
to
said?
be clear, yeah.
No, well, it was.
It's only at the street. We obviously need to be able to enter the garage areas.
Okay, but I think, yeah, let's just show that you're saying to the street, you're proposing to limit it to 7.5, but you're still maintaining your
10.15, I believe, yeah.
right, and that still exceeds the zoning bylaw
It
requirement.
does, yes.
Yeah, so you still need a variance.
Yeah.
Just
Correct,
because you
yes.
narrowed it in the front, doesn't mean it takes care of the variance.
That's correct.
But it does speak to one of the even though staff supported that thing, it does speak to one of their points in there that they would like to see it
Okay.
limited a bit.
Quite frankly, I think that can be dealt with at the site alteration
Probably.
permit process.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I could actually rewrite variance 1 because you're only limiting a portion of it.
Right.
Okay, let me start again. So
Right.
variance 1, recommend approval of variance 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. Although I didn't speak to the balcony, I did take a look out on the site, and a couple of things about this balcony. One is there's clearly an overlook into the backyards of 2 of the neighbors, and that's usually one of the considerations that we looked at. In the past, we did look at balconies, and there was a lot of back and forth, mainly because the 2014 bylaw was still under appeal. There was some consideration as to which of the bylaws would take precedence. And so there was a little bit of reluctance sometimes on the balconies, but now that it's fully in place, I think a balcony like this I can't support. So based on that, I would deny that variance, and
So approve the application, save and accept variance 5?
yeah, save and effect for variance 5 and make it subject to our standard 2 conditions, that the approval will expire within 2 years from the date of this decision, the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued, and also subject further to condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the drawings as submitted. I won't make a change with respect to that driveway because I'm not really sure how to do it, but I will note for the record that you've agreed to look at making a change such as that, subject to, of course, the town approving it.
No, I'll deal with it at the end, see where it goes. Discussion on that recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
Mr. Chairman, if I could offer a friendly amendment.
Yes.
Because the motion on the floor is to approve all except 5, that perhaps the second condition be modified to reflect the removal of the balcony from the drawings as submitted.
I was going to wait to see the outcome because we would need to direct that the plans, revised plans to remove the balcony be submitted depending on the outcome of this motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion on the recommendation? See none? Okay, so the recommendation is to approve variances as applied for, save and accept variance 5. on those two conditions. All those in support? No one opposed. Okay, sir, your application's been approved. Can you submit to us by this Friday, no later, a set of plans that eliminates the balcony? Because that's
Yes.
not part of the approval?
Right.
Okay?
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And that will
I'll
be
leave that
sort of,
then.
that will be attached to our decision, and then you can take whatever remedies you feel necessary. Thanks. Application CAVA 23-2017 at 380 Pine Avenue.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Joris Kieran, Kieran Design, 100 Bronte Road, Unit 10, Oakville. I'm the agent for the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Kieran. Okay, let's just see if there's anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 23-2017 at 380 Pine Avenue. Okay, members, I'm in your hands. Do you wish a presentation? You're familiar with the application? You've done your site visit, you studied the application, read the staff reports and the comments. I don't think we have any other comments on this application. Nope. Well, we do have something, right? Yes, we do. These are email support letters.
Not really.
Okay.
He's only supporting if all that gets done.
Oh, I see. Okay, Mr. Kern, since we do have
I would like to address that letter, and I can offer some explanation on that
Thank you.
if you like. We have two matters that I'd like to deal with on this application. The letter is the second item. The first one, in discussion with the neighbors on either side of this property, they expressed a concern about the stucco cladding that was originally proposed. And they had asked if we could change that to a wood siding and shake combination. My client agreed to that, and we have changed the drawings. It's not really directly related to the variances being requested tonight, but we've agreed to make that change, and we request that these drawings, these elevations, the only change being the cladding, be submitted into the record tonight so that that can form part of the approved drawing.
This is the conundrum that we in. While there's no reason why you won't implement what you committed to implement, and we expect that you would do so. But when we approve a variance with any conditions, they de facto become a revision to the zoning. So it's like saying to someone, forever and ever and ever, you have to have this type of cladding on your house in order to comply with zoning.
Mm.
And what do you do in 20 years when after subsequent attempts to keep it under maintenance, it just fails and you want to change that? Does that now, what does that do?
I wasn't aware that it was, a lifetime commitment in that regard. I thought it was more just clarifying that on this permit, in this application, we would be, just so the drawings that we're going to be submitting to the building department will match the drawings that are being...
But I don't think the building department cares whether you have yellow bricks or blue bricks or, cedar cladding or stucco. That's not something that they look for, because they'll look at the building and they'll see its general conformity with the plans. If you decide to change your garage doors from having 6 window panes to 2, would you think that's not in general conformity with the plans?
I would think so, and I
Right.
agree with you. We're
So
just
if you
doing
have-
it as a
if you have
courtesy.
if you have wood shingles and you decide to put stucco because, let's say wood shingles are not available for 2 years for some reason.
Right.
What do you do? Or in the future, someone who buys a house decides to change the wood shingles to stucco because they just had enough of the maintenance. Does someone then call and say, enforce the variance that says wood shingles after the building permit's been issued?
I think it's a valid point. One concern that we had was, we're doing it as a gesture of good faith to the discussions we had with the neighbors. We're going to implement this, so we do not want to jeopardize the process tonight or cause a deferral. So I'll leave it up to you if you'd
No,
rather
I
not.
was okay
Yeah.
with and I accept your commitment, and, you know, as you know, this has been live streamed, and whoever wrote the letter, will probably be watching, and they know, and it's not only, it's an oral agreement, you're gonna do what you said you were gonna do. But I'm just concerned as to what, and you suggest that you want the plans that are filed with the committee to reflect this facade change to the wood cladding, and I commend you for doing that, and I want you to implement it, but I just don't know if I want to get the building department of the town of Oakville to be enforcing whether garage doors are yellow, red, or the cladding is wood or aluminum, or in the future they get changed to a stucco. You know,
Right.
I think that's heading into a little bit of a direction that might be a problem. You know, or, you know, you put on your notes here asphalt gray shingles and you go black. Does that mean the building department has to conclude it's not in general conformity with the plans before the committee? I think that might be heading down the wrong road. So although I commend you, and we're gonna take this plan in to indicate, because it's being live streamed, as I said, that this is your commitment, and it shows wood cladding, but wood shingles, but it's not something that I think we're gonna say, if we go down the road of an approval, that it has to be that, but we'll recognize it in the minutes, and this live recording will do that.
Okay, fair enough.
Members, any comments on that suggestion that,
I think that's fine, Mr. Chairman. You're right. I don't think you can write a condition like that.
all right, thank you, Mr. Mark Charlevoix. You need to speak up, though, in the future, because I'm very close and I can hardly hear, too. So, can I have a recommendation on this application?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I have one more point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the letter covers off a second request made by the neighbor to the west, Mr. Talowski. And we had some discussions with him, and we have another request, but with the caveat that we do not want to disrupt the process, and we do not want to cause a deferral. But if the committee is willing to cooperate, then we are also willing to make a small change to the front yard setback request, which on the application is for 9.63 meters. However, in discussions with the neighbor, he would prefer it to be slightly further back, making it an even 10 meters, so it lines up with his house better. And my client is also agreeable to that. So if the committee will permit it, we are okay with having the front yard setback.
Right. I think in that context, as we've said in the past, the variance is more in compliance with the zoning bylaw and not further away. So jurisdictionally, I think we can accept the revised application on that basis, that you're improving the variance sought, not making it worse. Do you have a plan that shows the 10 meters?
Yes, I've just put it up on the overhead here. So it's basically the exact same drawing, except we have moved the house back slightly, and the 10, you can't really see it here, but the 10 meter setback is indicated there, which I'm prepared to submit into the record tonight.
Fair enough. Okay, members, are you accept that amendment application?
I just want to toss it back out to planning, because just because of your analysis, which said that that the proposed dwelling setback appropriately coordinates with the adjacent buildings. Are you okay with this shift?
We're okay with that as well, yes.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
That's it.
On that basis, we'll take the revised application into committee, and we'll reflect variance number 2 as amended to 10 meters rather than 9.63. Who would like to move a recommendation?
Are we going to do that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move a recommendation.
Thank you.
I find that the variances that are before us, as the application has met the 4 tests,
Has met the 4 tests of the Planning Act?
yes, thank you. And the development is in keeping with the character of this neighborhood. As I drove through for the site visits, it is a whirlwind of construction down there. But what's nice to see is that most of the houses coming up are falling within creating a unified and new characteristic to the neighborhood. And given that both neighbors are in accordance with what's presented before us, and there are no objection from the public, as well as staff's support of this application, I'll follow through with the recommendation to approve this application as amended to permit a front yard of 10 meters, and that the development proceed in accordance with our standard condition within 2 years, if from the date of the decision and that the proposed development has proceeded or building permit issued at that time. As well as the standard condition that the proposed well be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated December 22nd of 2016. And if you'd like to add the drawings submitted.
Well, we have revised plans dated February 10, 2017, and that includes the site plan that shows the 10-meter front yard setback. So we'll
Okay.
substitute to February 10.
Sure.
And I think what you wanted to say is that we also reflected on the one letter submission we had on this application, requesting the cladding, and we had a discussion on the cladding, and understand that the general accordance with the drawings does not mean we accept that we have to also govern the exterior cladding of the material. And we've addressed the issue in the second paragraph of the letter respecting the 10-meter setback.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support of this, the application is being approved, sir.
Thank you.
Again, we encourage you to continue with the cladding as suggested, because as you saw, the character of the neighborhood includes that, at least in terms of people trying to maintain that feel of the street. Most renovations are apparently proceeding on that basis. So, and we believe that you will do that, Mr. Karen. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay. Let's get coordinated here. Application CAV 24-2017 at 1286 Cambridge Drive.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council. My name is Azmin Khosravi from Care Engineering, 603 Argus Road, suite number 207, Oakville, Ontario. I'm representing the owner. I'm the agent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. Anyone have an interest in application CAV 24-2017 at 1286 Cambridge Drive? Okay, sir, anything you wish to add to your application? We've done the site visit. As you know, the staff are recommending support. Members, do you have any items of clarification, anything of interest to explore with the agent? Yes?
It's really a question for planning. Explain to me what's the difference between using the existing foundations to create a whole new house or just tearing it down to create a house? How is that looked at differently, just so that I can reflect on this?
You mean from a zoning perspective?
Yeah.
Variances are still required, even though you're building on top of the foundation. It's the structure itself that requires to comply with the regulations of the zoning bylaw.
So, because what we're approving here is existing conditions then, essentially, and we've had many discussions about this. I'm sorry now I opened it. But
there's construction here.
There's construction
here
on top of the existing foundations.
Right.
But it's the foundations that are causing the variance.
No, but the structure that goes on top of that, there's new construction.
Yeah, but it's being built right on the same foundations. So
I understand
I was
your
just trying
question,
to
but I'm-
understand that, the nuance or the difference. Okay. All right.
Because the foundation is there, and that requires a setback, but so does a structure on, because the bylaws govern building and structures, not just foundations.
If I may add, my understanding of the point was because the eave height on existing wall, main wall, was changed, that was subject to the variance. That was the only reason, really. We had an 8-foot wall above the foundation existing, which we adding 2 feet to it to get a 10-foot high ceiling. And apparently that triggered this, yes, other than that. I wish to add one more point, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I believe when I was, before coming to the meeting, I realized, as I understood, the old bylaw as well have the very same variance for the same reason, which was missing in my application, I believe, for the setback.
Yeah, but we're not dealing with the old bylaw anymore. The old bylaw doesn't apply.
Perfect. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
it's just the new bylaw.
That's right.
The bylaw was approved, substantially approved, and
Right.
if there was a need for a variance to the old bylaw, it
Okay.
would have been noted here.
Yeah, the only reason I added, I noticed when I was going through other applications, they still had included old bylaw in their variance, and mine did not, so I just wanted to.
Right.
I appreciate it.
And if you needed that variance, it would have been kind of late to be asking for it now.
Of course,
so-
yeah, just wanted to add.
But I doubt it very much if it comes up through a subsequent building permit zoning examination. Otherwise, it would have been caught right now, so.
Yeah, I assume so, yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? See none, okay, we'll take this matter to committee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
No, I asked earlier, just, let's poll again, make sure there's no one here for CAV 24-2017, application of 1286 Cambridge Drive. No, there was none. Okay, we'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
having reviewed the materials and heard the submissions and conversation, I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to 2 conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated May 2016 as submitted, and the second being that the approval will expire within 2 years if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, sir. There's discussion on that recommendation? See none. All those in support? No one opposed. Your application has been approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll call upon application CAV 25-2017 at 340 Spruce Street.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. It's Alison Strickland from Strickland Intelligent Design Associates, 79 Wilson Street, Oakville.
Good evening, Ms. Strickland. Again, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 25-2017 for 340 Spruce Street? Okay, we have a situation here similar to the last one. We've done our site visit. We understand the application. Staff are recommending approval. Members, is there anything you wish to explore with Ms. Strickland? No. Is there anything you wish to add to the application?
No.
All right, we'll take this matter into committee and issue a decision. Who would like to move a recommendation? Ms. McHale, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move a recommendation to approve the application that's set before us. Both variances deal with existing conditions, and they're not expected to create any adverse impacts on the abutting properties. With that said, I'll move a motion to approve, subject to the proposed dwelling being constructed in general accordance with the plans dated January 3rd of 2017, as well as our general condition that approval will expire within 2 years from the date of the decision if the proposed development has not proceeded and/or a building permit not issued.
Thank you. And also, I guess you want to reflect the fact there were no written comments from anyone or anyone in attendance here this evening? that had
Yes, thank you,
adverse
Mr.
interest?
Chairman, as well as the
Okay.
support of staff.
All right, perfect. Discussion on recommendation to approve subject to those 2 conditions. All those in support? No one opposed. Your application has been approved.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll proceed to application CAV 26-2017. This is at 510 Anthony Drive. Good evening, sir, and name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper, a planning consultant with Glenn Schnarr and Associates. Our mailing address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Suite 700 in Mississauga, Ontario.
Okay, again, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 26-2017 at 510 Anthony Drive? Okay. Sir, would you proceed with the presentation on this? Thank you.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, the application before you this evening seeks a single variance. The variance seeks an increase in the maximum amount of residential floor area that's permitted. The zoning bylaw permits a maximum of 43%, and it's based on a percentage of lot area. So under the as-of-right zoning regulations, the property could be developed with a maximum residential floor area of 199.74 square meters. The application before you seeks a maximum of 48% for a maximum floor area of 222.9 square meters, which is an increase of just over 23 square meters beyond the maximum permitted in the zone. The overall increase in floor area that's being sought above and beyond what it currently exists is just almost 77 square meters of floor area. The additions are being made to the predominantly the southeast corner of the building is on the ground floor, is where there's a new sort of corner being built. And then along the second floor in the rear and along the easterly side of the dwelling. For the record, on the first floor, it's this corner here of new floor area that's being added to the existing dwelling. And I should point out that this is a renovation. This is not a complete demolition and rebuild. This is a renovation of the existing dwelling. If I could just zoom out a little bit here. The new floor area that's being added on the second story is concentrated on the easterly side of the building in that location there. I do note that we did receive comments from the owners of the property at 514 Anthony Drive. In the correspondence, it mentions that their property is located to the west of the subject property. I think that was an error in the correspondence. I think it was to the east, because in the correspondence it does mention the address of 514, which is this property here, and it also mentions a number of, I believe, 6 fir trees. These are the fir trees that are located on here, along the easterly property line. They're actually not located on my client's property. They're located on 514 Anthony Drive. There's no intent on the part of my client to damage or destroy or remove any part of those trees. The addition on that side of the property is a second floor addition, so there's no excavation. Sorry, I should add that it's a second floor addition above the existing first story. So there will be no excavation for foundations or anything like that. The intent is to preserve those trees as they are in situ. There will be minor pruning to the rear 2 of the trees. That's likely just going to be some branches in the second floor area as required. A visual inspection shows that there's not a significant encroachment of the branches into the area where the floor area is going to be added on that second floor. So, although not an arborist, I would suggest to you that there would be minimal disturbance to those trees, and certainly it's not the intent of my client to do any serious damage to those trees.
So it's a full second floor addition in the rear?
If I could highlight the plan What I've shown in that red line through you, Mr. Chair, is the extent of the existing second floor, so that
So can you cross out what is new, or just crosshatch what's new? Okay, so all that's new,
Sorry, that is existing.
existing, okay.
Everything outside of that hatching area is, would be new.
On the second floor.
New floor area on the second floor.
On the first floor, you have the outline, which is,
Yeah, and it's sort of that general vicinity there. And the.
what does that show?
The ground floor area. That
Can you
corner
go-
would.
Can you go to the ground floor? Might as well use the ground floor, you have it. So that's new.
Yes, that's correct, that's
Okay.
new.
So that's new, and then go to the second floor. Maybe we can zoom out. It's way too close. All right, so the house is like,
No,
has an
easy.
L type of appearance on the ground floor. Or on the second floor. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
A little bit of an odd configuration on
Yeah,
the ground
understood.
floor. Again, this is all existing on the ground floor.
Yeah. So that's why your comment that you may need to prune some trees on that side, because you are putting a second floor addition closer to that side.
Yeah, the aim is to reduce the impact, obviously, as much as possible. Those trees are not, as I said, on the subject property, they are on the adjacent property owners. So to the point that they encroach into the construction area, there will be some removal required. I don't think it's going to be significant vegetation removal.
Is there a permit process to prune trees? I mean, you'll need some type of arborist report to ensure.
Yeah, so I have answers to two questions there.
Yes.
The first question with respect to permit, I don't believe that there's a permit required for pruning of trees. I can certainly defer to staff for an answer
Is
on
that
that.
considered injuring a tree?
I think to the extent that a tree encroaches, a tree that is not on your property that encroaches into your property, I believe you have a right to reasonable pruning of that tree.
But even if it injures it to the point where it may go too much that it may cause it ill health?
So that would lead to my second answer. It is the intent of my client to have all the pruning done by a certified arborist.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And again, it's not the intent to cause damage to the trees.
Particularly because they're not on your property, as you said, right?
I would suggest absolutely because they're not on our
Yeah.
property.
That makes sense. Any questions? Anything else to add, sir?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no.
Okay, thank you. Just have a seat nearby, and we'll ask you to come back after we hear the concerns, if any, from the neighbors. Who would like to come down first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Eric Schroeder, 506 Anthony.
Eric Schroeder,
Oops, sorry about that.
506.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Our concern is the setback on the on the west side property line, that it doesn't change from what it is now.
They're not seeking any variances to the setback.
So, okay, so they're going to maintain that.
Well, they're not, well, like, I don't know.
But he's not going to encroach.
It appears that they're projecting the same sidewall, but we'll
Okay.
have Mr. Capper confirm that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, a second?
Questions are through us, and
Oh,
we'll get your,
only to
and
you?
we'll get
Okay.
your clarification. So
Okay.
the first question you have is confirm that nothing projects beyond the main walls right now, the side walls.
Right.
Okay.
And then, what I gather is he's proposing to put a second floor over the entire house, and right now at the back of the house, there's just a small addition.
Correct.
A single story.
Correct.
Yeah, there is. The house was originally a box. The last owners put a small addition, like just a little sitting room.
Almost like an L shape.
No, just three-sided
Right.
at the back where this says family room. Under that.
On
that's
the second floor?
No, it's on the main floor.
On the
Right
main
now,
floor.
there's just.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's just a single story. Now, I just want to, is that being torn down? And then now you're going to build all across the back to increase the size? Because how are you going to build the second story on something that was a single story? And I believe there's only a 4-foot foundation under that.
Well, I don't know, we're getting into engineering things, but the request before us is to build a second-story addition.
Over the whole thing.
Over, yeah, if you go to the next page, after that.
Right.
There was the other drawing that shows what's existing and what's proposed, you see? The crosshatch, that's all new.
No, the crosshatch is there.
It's all existing, right, so
Yeah.
they're gonna build that all new. And whether or not they can do it, it's not for us to.
Okay, that's not for you to decide, okay.
Well, no, I mean, we're not construction gurus, all we know is
No,
they're
no.
saying this is what they like to do, and if it's a construction.
Okay, well, our concern is that the house maintains its straight line down the west side.
Yes, okay, and we'll get you clarification on that. Any
Okay.
questions of Mr. Schroeder? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee? Going once, going twice? Okay. Mr. Capper?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Schroeder, just by way of clarification, forgive me for just one moment. Forgive me, I've changed the orientation slightly. Anthony Drive is located at the top end of the page. This is Mr. Schroeder's property here at 506 Anthony. This is the existing side yard, westerly side yard setback. The existing setback to the existing building is 2.61 meters, and we preserve that setback at 2.61 meters throughout that westerly elevation. The one-story addition that Mr. Schroeder is referring to is this area here. The intent of this application is to, he's correct in that it is an additional floor being added above that that previous addition, and then to fill in the corner on the ground floor as well.
Okay, but the answer to the
But the
question
answer to the
Mr.
question is
Schroeder had, you're
absolutely-
maintaining the 2.61 meters, you're not making it any worse.
That's correct.
That's right up to the second floor as well.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? See none, okay, we'll take this back to committee, thank you.
Thank you.
Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Mark Charlevoix?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Having visited the site, read the staff report here, listened to the presentation, noting that we do have a letter of support in here, which, sought clarification on the trees, which I think we dealt with in this meeting, as well as listening to the neighbor on the other side and his concerns with respect to the setback. And particularly noting, too, that the planning report that was included in here, which really explains things well. Although I find that, on the surface is a bit of a big increase in the square footage. However, we're not exceeding other aspects of the envelope, and the coverage is still very low. And in looking at the design of the house and the additions on it, you're basically staying within the sort of square footprint of the existing envelope, and I find it just actually evens out the building and makes it look nicer. So on that basis, I find that this request for a variance to increase the residential floor area is desirable for the area and does meet the other 3 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm going to put forward a recommendation that it be approved, subject to the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated November 2016 as submitted, and subject further to the condition that the approval will expire within 2 years if a building permit is not issued.
Discussion on that recommendation? See none, all those in support? Anyone opposed? See none, the application's been approved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Good evening. application CAV 27-2017. This is at the property located at 5019 Venetia Drive.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Joel Tanner, Simple Design Studio, 21 Sherwood Rise, Hamilton, Ontario.
Good evening, Mr. Tanner. Just before you proceed, does anyone here this evening have an interest in application CAV 27-2017 for the property at 5090 Venetia Drive? See none. Okay, we do have two letters of support from Mr. Neil Patel. We have a letter of support from, oops, is this the wrong one?
It's just one.
Oh, just the one, okay. Just the one, yes. Okay. Sir, is there anything you wish to add to the application?
Not at this time.
Members, you've done your site visit, read the staff report. Is there any questions of clarification, anything you wish to ask or seek to get clarified? See none? Okay, let's proceed with the recommendation. Who would like to move a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Proceed.
Having reviewed the materials and visited the site, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the test of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted, and the second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued.
Thank you. Any discussion on recommendation? See none. All those in support? No one opposed. Your application being approved.
Thanks so much, committee.
Good evening. Okay, application CAV 28 at 383 Riverside Drive. So application CAV a 28-2017 at 383 Riverside Drive. Wow, I had a struggle with that one. Don't know why. Yeah.
Good evening,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Chairman and committee. My name is Jennifer Trapman. I live at 383 Riverside Drive.
Thank you. Okay, okay, we'll need a presentation here. Staff are not recommending the height. So you can give us a presentation on what's driving that height and assist us in arriving at a decision.
Okay. Well, to begin with, in designing this house, we took into consideration your design guidelines for stable residential communities.
Yes.
So if you go to item 322 within those guidelines, we took into consideration, it was our desire to not impact the overall character of the neighborhood in designing this house. And we've designed the house in such a way as to not appear higher than the neighboring homes. I mean, it's a neighborhood of 1950s bungalows, but it's also a neighborhood that's seen an increasing change happening in our little pocket there. In the last 4 or 5 years, there's been an increasing amount of new homes being built in the area. But it's our desire to maintain the character of the neighborhood. Also, we've also designed the house to take in the landscape in the back, which is the ravine. Because the back of the house faces north, northeast, we get very little sunlight back there. So increasing the height to increase the size of windows in order to take in natural light and also the view. It was also a desire of ours. As well, in the neighborhood at 350 Riverside Drive, they applied for a variance of 0.3 meters in January of 2016, and they were granted that amount. I have brought photographs of that build so you can see how that build looks in comparison to the neighboring bungalows.
So just so I can understand it, you're not proposing a 9.25 height throughout the whole roof structure. It's only for a small portion?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's the architectural elements or the expression on that, I guess, the front facade that's driving the height? 'Cause I'm looking at the south elevation, A5, and I see over the main door, when you project up, you see the architectural height expression
Yes.
that has the height at 9.25, and I guess the
Right.
balance of the roof, almost half of the other roof meets the height requirement?
Yes, good portion of it.
I need his name because you're speaking.
I'm sorry?
We will need your husband's
Oh,
name because he's
okay.
speaking.
It's Ashley Trapman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's just we have to take names, you know.
We're
Sure.
tag teaming.
Speaking and the transcriber will go, who is that?
Right.
Okay. And you were going to show us a picture. Can we zoom in so we can get a better
Yes.
How do
understanding?
we do that? Oh, there.
Well, I think they'll do it or maybe there you go.
Yeah, so this was the house at 350 that applied for the 9.30 variance that was granted. And you can sort of see the houses around it. I think that's one. Where's the other one on the other side?
So you can see.
When
Hard
was
to
that
see on
house
that.
built?
That one? It's currently, this
It's
was 2
under
days ago.
construction.
Yeah, I remember this house, Mr. Chairman.
No, I know, but when did it seek variances? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, that was January of 2016.
This is the one where they made a mistake and they were supposed to build it lower and they ended up, through an error, building it higher, and they came looking for a variance. And we were faced with a decision, do we tell them to tear down the building
Yeah.
or keep it?
So that's becoming your precedent character.
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of change. Well,
Sure.
this is the decision here, but
What's the address? There we go.
350.
And what's that height? 9.3 meters.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure when you did your drive-by, you'll notice that that whole neighborhood is in a massive transition. And I get the staff's denial, or when you look at our property relative to some of the other bungalows around it,
Into the microphone, please.
that this is a shot of our house. Our house is, well, 2 doors up from that blue, so where the blue car
on
is.
the other side of this van
Yes,
is our
yes,
house.
yes.
Right?
In there.
So you'll see that in our immediate neighborhood, the change is becoming more and more pronounced day by day. That house that we just showed you that was under construction is sort of at the end of the road.
No, we understand what you're saying, but what have you looked at a way to reduce the 0.25 meter, quarter of a meter height? We're talking about,
8 inches.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have you looked at ways to decrease? It seems to be that's the driving concern. I mean, what does it do to the architectural expression? You know, what is it that, I understand you got two different roof line, one complies, one doesn't comply, so the variance is restricted just to that narrow section of the roof line, maybe 50% of it. Do you
Yeah.
understand that, Mr. Charlevoix? It's right here.
It really just,
speaking to the
for us, it simply just boils down to the whole perspective of it from the street, right?
Like, what would it do to your roof structure if you were to pull that down to 0.25 meters? Basically, make it match the balance of the roof.
Well, certainly there's going to be less roof showing.
Right.
It's going to lower that peak. Is it going to dramatically change the overall look? I suppose that's a matter of opinion.
Staff are not concerned at all with the front yard, but they seem to suggest that the height, maybe it's an attempt to say that you haven't really demonstrated why you couldn't comply with zoning. You know, one of the questions you requested in the application is why do you need relief from the zoning bylaw?
Pardon me?
One of the questions that you asked in the application
Yeah.
is why do you need relief from the zoning bylaw? And, you know, we've heard different things like it's you know, an architectural feature that's intended to provide the breakup of a roof line, and, you know,
Yeah.
but we haven't heard that argument other than, you know, it's nice to have, but is there something structurally impossible to accomplish?
No, I don't think there's anything structurally impossible. I think it's just for us, it's really just the overall look, and I get we're only talking about 8 inches. Will that 8 inches dramatically impair the overall look, the peak?
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. Any questions? No. Anything you wish to add? Yeah, Mr. Charlebois?
I just want to confirm, because to me, it's not clear on the drawings, but the .82 feet you are saying on elevation A05, or, well, .25 meters?
Yeah, so if you,
Is simply that? Because it's just not clear to me that
Yeah.
that's what it is, and it doesn't go any lower. Is that the case?
no, and if you look at A06, you'll also
yeah.
see, you also see the area that penetrates. It's that double lines on the
Yeah.
right.
Right.
Yeah, but nowhere on these elevations does it actually say that 9 meters is, the major roof line, and that 9.25 is the thing. I'm just trying to confirm
Well,
your
on
statement.
elevation A05, it says 9,250 millimeters.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so where is 9,000? Where does 9,000 go? That's what I want to know. Where's the existing roof,
It doesn't
zoning
show
bylaw?
where it's permitted. I'm only guessing it's roughly in that
Okay.
same area.
It's just that area right there, yeah.
It's just that. So it's really just, as you were saying, it's really just an
An
architectural feature.
architectural feature, yeah.
This here.
Although there's no dimension to demonstrate that. We're presuming that's it, and that's what the.
Yeah, and I think the designers just sort of left that out
Double line, this is it. This is
for whatever reason.
This is the variance. Doesn't make any sense.
Waste of time. Okay. All right, thanks.
Any further questions? So, no, okay, we'll take this matter into committee.
Did you ask? I missed it.
No one here, yeah. Is there anyone, again, just for the record, anyone here has an interest in application CAVA 28-2017 at 383 Riverside? Okay. Yeah. Just have a seat in the front there and we'll, yeah.
Name's Stephen Hamlin, 145 Lakeshore Road East, Unit 200. I'm actually here on behalf of my in-laws, actually, who are neighbors 2 doors to the left. And they've asked me to come on their behalf tonight just to express their support on both variances being applied
What
for.
address?
They are 387 Riverside Drive.
You're here in support?
Yes.
Did we
Mr.
get
and
your
Mrs.
name?
Page, Page.
Mr. and Mrs. Page.
That's right.
Okay.
In support, it's more we understand that the front yard setback is really not the issue here, that it's the height. And I do want to state that it was their opinion that they do understand that the difference between the two heights. There's that right side, and then you have the main roof there over the top that is the 8 inches higher. And it does kind of accentuate that feature kind of down the center and the left side of the elevation. So, they did feel that it was appropriate, and they did like that. The designer did consider it, that they were considerate to the fact that it seems the massing of the house, it kind of comes up from the top of the main floor, and then it kind of comes up. So it's soft in the presentation of the elevation.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee? Okay, I guess there's no need to respond to that. They're here in support, so unless there's anything further to add, we'll take this matter into committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'll give it a shot.
Thank you.
Having reviewed the materials and heard the submissions, including Mr. Hamlin's comments, I think that I'm going to deviate from the staff position with respect to the height variance. I think that the architectural composition of this building is excellent, and that the building's broken up into a variety of planes, and the bulk of the second story is contained within the roof form. So I don't think that the height is a significant issue. I think that the architectural element along the portion of the roof is not significant, and it's probably driven to a large degree by a component of flat roof that probably resides behind there. So I don't think it's a significant issue. I don't think it's going to contribute to over massing on the street edge. So I'll put forward a motion of approval, finding that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. And it would be subject to 2 standard conditions. The first being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the drawings as submitted. And the second being that the approval expire within 2 years if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you. Discussion on recommendation? See none. All those in support? No one opposed. Your application has been approved. Application
much.
CAV 200, 2016. This is at the property at 602 Parkside Drive. Good evening, sir.
everyone.
Name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Antonio Mastriani. I'm the homeowner of 602 Parkside Drive.
Okay. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 200, 2016 at 602 Parkside Drive? Members, you have any questions, clarifications? Sir, anything you wish to add? We've done our site visit, read the staff report, familiar with the application. Is there anything you wish to ask? I don't believe we have any letters of support or objection on this one from my recollection. No. All right, we'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Charlebois?
Mr. Chairman, having reviewed the report, done my site visit, and I find that these variances are primarily technical in nature, and I find that they meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I'm going to make a recommendation that they be approved, subject
to the 2 standard conditions.
Well, there's a couple in here. Subject to the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in accordance with the plans as submitted, and subject to a second condition that the applicant submit a tree preservation and landscape plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and subject further to the condition that's approved.
Where'd you get that one?
Reading it out of...
I think that was the old one.
Oh, I got rid of the previous one?
Yes.
Darn.
Yeah. So there is staff are just recommending that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted and your standard 2-year condition.
Oh, you know what? I'm reading it out of the...
Older report.
I apologize, the old one.
Okay, so you recommend approval subject to those 2 conditions?
I do.
Any
My
discussion on
apologies.
the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application has been approved.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Okay, we're dealing with application CAVA 206, 2016. This is a revised application for 1316 Acton Crescent. This is a matter that was deferred from our meeting of December 13, 2016. So maybe bring us up to date with what the revisions have been to refresh our memories.
Sure. Okay, the revisions that we did. One of them was we removed one of the variances requested, which was a side yard encroachment.
Remove side yard, yes?
Yeah, so we removed that one. The major reason we deferred the application was,
I never got your name and address for the record, sorry.
Stephen Hamlin,
Okay.
145 Lakeshore Road East,
Sure,
Unit
thank you.
200.
Okay, we went right to the meat of the matter. Go ahead.
So what it was is, this lot's a little special in the fact that it has a natural area in the back. This was my first encounter with that in my career, and it was brought to my attention by zoning staff probably about a week and a half or 2 weeks before the hearing date. And they asked us to do, so Tony Detella was nice enough to tell us how to fix the variance, but he had made a mistake, and he had his numbers incorrect. It was a simple math error. It was just a mistake. Then, I had to check it very quickly because I needed it that afternoon. So I approved it. Thus, I ended up paying for the deferral. So that is the main portion of the deferral.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just check to see if there's anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 206, 2016 revised for 1360 Acton Crescent. Sir, you want to come and speak to the matter?
Hi, my name's Chris Ritz. I live at 1373 Constance Drive.
Chris,
Yeah, Chris
last name?
Ritz.
Okay. R-I-T-Z.
Ruetz.
Okay, and the address again?
1373 Constance Drive.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
It's right next door. It's actually, even though it's on the same.
And your interest in this application?
I'd be the neighbor.
Yep.
So I'm in full support of the build. However, some of the variants that they're asking for, we were probably one of the original builders in this area here too. We built within the bylaws, and I've noticed recently that a lot of houses are not building within the bylaws, which is affecting the landscape of the street. And my concern is the effect that this is going to have on not just my outlook of the house, but property value, etc., and what it's going to look like down the road.
So are you here in support or in opposition?
Opposition, sorry.
Okay. And which of the two variances or both variances in terms of the residential gross floor area and the front yard?
Yeah, the front yard is the major one.
Front yard is the major one?
Yep.
Because it's bringing it closer.
And then the other one, I wasn't aware, what was the other one? There was 3 before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
at
we're
the
down
side, yeah, so it'd be the side too.
That's gone.
Okay, that's gone now, yeah.
Floor area.
There's an increase in floor area is the other one of, I don't know.
That's minimal.
It's an increase in floor area of about 50 square feet or something.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Chris Ritz?
Yeah, you just sort of, what is it about the front yard setback? Just bear with me.
It's the angle of the street, so we're sort of at the corner. And
Yeah.
And that's my concern, is when you look at the houses around us, everybody's moving their houses forward, and because we're an existing build that's already there, our house is sitting significantly behind than what's being positioned on the street right now.
Right, you're set back at 9.73 meters from the arc, from the radius. And they're proposing to be set back,
That's 5.45.
right, but that's measured to the front porch.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have the agent respond to that.
Yep.
So you're saying the radius or the elbow of the street,
Yep,
okay?
because there's 3 houses that are sort of in that little corner spot there.
So there's a split in the address here, right?
Yes,
Right down the property line here.
correct,
This is on Acton and you're on Constance.
correct.
And Mr. Heck, is the zoning the same on both streets?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's an unusual split.
Yes.
Okay, any questions? Okay,
No, okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess the concern or the interest is that the houses are being pushed further forward. The house on, that Mr. Ritz was here for is set back at 9.73 on the south side. And the property to your south at 1364 is set back at 9.08.
So it seems there's, just by the notes by staff, 1364 Acton Crescent did come for a reduced front yard setback to 7.72 that was approved. So it looks like possibly the surveyor still has the old house on the,
7.72?
yeah, that's what it's showing here in their notes.
Okay.
Okay. And then, you know, we also have the next house beside that, 1368, where there was a variance to 5.92 meters, and that was to more of a 2-story feature. The feature we're trying to come closer to in this house is a 1-story covered porch. If you actually look, I did put some dimensions on here to show how close the actual major portion of the massing of the building is. And it sort of starts at about 7.09. I'm sorry, 7.01, and then it kind of flares out and becomes greater as we come down to the left side. We did take into account as well that, that this is coming closer to the street. So we did work on the massing and form of the building quite extensively.
But it's coming closer to the street because of the Conservation Authority's pushed it further back than it did.
That's the only
old
reason.
buildings, yeah.
If we didn't have a floodplain restriction and we didn't have the natural area, we wouldn't be here. We could actually comply with all the zoning bylaws. It's just the natural area pushed us over to, about that 1.6%, I think it is, and just pulling us forward because of the floodplain.
Any further questions of Mr. Hamlin?
Just put up that drawing again?
The site plan?
Yeah. So I just want to confirm that, so in the orange, that's the floodplain?
So,
That you
yes.
bite?
So this is my floodplain line.
Right.
Here, and then this is the 6 meter offset. And that's it. And we've designed the house outside of the 6 meter offset. There's encroachments in a couple of different spots. Those are allowable encroachments as per the conservation.
Yeah. My other question for you is, my drawings in the submission, so my drawings, February 14th, they show 1.25. Okay, good. So, yeah. The trouble with deferral, sometimes you're looking at the wrong drawings. Okay, I understand that. Good.
Okay.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll take this matter to committee. Thank you. Okay, who would like to move a recommendation on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move a recommendation to approve this application as submitted. I believe that it does meet the four tests of the Planning Act. Given the tight parameters that the applicant has to deal with in terms of the natural area in the rear of the building, as well as the parameters that Conservation Halton put on the development of this land, I feel that these variances are appropriate and are desirable for the development of this land. And I do see how, through the surveyor, that the front yard setback that is requested before us does maintain the desirability of the streetscape, given how it flares out and how it does meet the either houses on the west as well as the east. I'll make it subject to the conditions that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted, and that the permit pursuant to Ontario Regulation 162/06 be obtained from Conservation Halton. Those were recommendations that staff had requested that we put in on record, as well as our standard condition that approval will expire within 2 years if the development has not proceeded and/or building permit not issued.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Mr. Heck. We've never seen the request that, as a condition of approval, that a permit be obtained from the Conservation Halton. And it's almost like saying you also have to obtain site plan approval, you have to obtain a building permit, you have to obtain a site alteration permit. That's naturally and normally incidental to any approval that's granted.
I would agree with you, Mr. Chair. That was a request that came from the Conservation Authority.
Right.
Normally, staff wouldn't be asking for that, just on the basis that what you said, a permit's required, it's required, regardless of whether it's a condition or not.
And sir, and you've already consulted Conservation Halton.
Yes.
And the reason why I ask is I just don't think it's absolutely necessary or it's redundant to apply conditions, at least in my view, when matters have to go through a permit process anyway, it's someone else's jurisdiction. But if you have no objection to that condition, we can attach it, but I
It's,
just wanted.
it's already actually been approved. They're just waiting for the payment.
Oh.
That's all.
All right, so it's your motion. Welcome to either keep it like that or amend it to reflect our just discussion and keep it to our standard 2 conditions.
I'm fine either way, Mr. Chairman, but given that the applicant said that the permit was approved already, I see.
No harm?
No harm.
Okay, recommendation to approve subject to those 3 conditions. All those in support? No one opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your application is approved. Motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn by Mr. Hardcastle. All in support? Adjourned at 9:02.